everybody, I'm Natasha Kathi-Chandra, the Artistic Director at Tara Theatre and the Director of Sweetmeats. And I'm joined today by Karim Khan, our playwright. Hi Karim.
Hi.
We've got a couple of questions to ask you about Sweetmeats as we approach previewing it and opening the show to all of you. Where did the inspiration for Sweetmeats come from?
So for me, I think the idea for Sweetmeats came when I wanted to essentially write a love story about South Asian elders. I felt like this was a generation that we've not properly seen on our stages, and to really put them front and centre of their own love story, and for them not necessarily to be like the side characters, like the parents or the grandparents, but for them to come of age and impact each other and change. But also, I think through the prism of health and sugar and diabetes, which I think is so endemic within our community, within the South Asian community, and really wanting to explore those ideas and within a diabetes workshop, and something that felt quite fun, but also quite sad and poignant at the same time.
Did you investigate? Did you do any ground research? Did you go to diabetes workshops to get a sense of what the vibe was?
I didn't actually. No, maybe I should have done that, but I think I feel like because there's so much of my family are diabetics, and my brothers have got type 1 diabetes as well. So I think I kind of grew up with just a knowledge of sugar levels, diabetes, all of those things, and for me it was just those daily realities with the things that I think I wanted to really immerse in this play, and for an audience to from the in that story.
Absolutely, I feel like everybody I've spoken to, particularly from the South Asian community, so many people have a parent or a grandparent or a family member living with diabetes. My dad was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. My grandmother was diabetic. And my grandfather, who I never met, was also diabetic and died quite young. And I think there has been an increased amount of conversation and curiosity, I hope, around how this is impacting communities. And we talk a little bit about that in the play as well, the history and the genetic link to why so many South Asian people, particularly our elders, are now diabetic. Was that something as well that you were really interested in exploring some of the political angle in the play as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the political parts of the play feel really important. The two characters we meet are South Asian elders who've migrated from Pakistan and India, and so obviously I think there's a lot to explore about where they came from and the way their sugar levels have their health has been impacted by famines and colonialism, and this is something that we talked a lot about in developing the play, about how the cost of colonization has impacted our bodies and our health. And one of the offstage character, Mrs. Radcliffe, who kind of oversees the play, I guess is I think a symbol of so much of the way I guess brown bodies have been institutionalized and and made clinical. But it's almost what happens when these people are in that space and kind of trying to navigate their health and trying to navigate their lives.
Yeah, I think there was a question, particularly when we were R&Ding this, around the character called Mrs. Radcliffe, and whether you sort of very actively thought about it being a specific reference to, the political angle of the colonial impact on the history of India and Pakistan, with the partition as well, but also, and I can't actually remember what you said and whether that was a deliberate choice or whether you just happened to like the name and so you used it.
Yeah, for me it was a bit of a deliberate choice, actually. I think kind of making a reference to Cyril Radcliffe and the idea of putting a line between India and Pakistan, and especially what that represents for these characters as an Indian woman and a Pakistani man, and yet it's kind of harking back to a time that was pre-partition as well, and how both these characters share so much, the language, the food, and yet their identities have been kind of politicized. And so I think it's been really fun to explore that and to and see that come to life, and see already as audiences have come from both those communities, and how we talk about mangoes as well.
That's one of the from the preview audiences that we've had, that is definitely one of the most sort of subtle, it's like a cricket match, you know,
Yeah.
India and Pakistan play a cricket match. You have the togetherness and you have the community, but you also have but we're better, or, you know, the Pakistani mango's better. That's definitely given us a really warm and a really enthusiastic audience reaction. And there's some very active sort of head nods and agreement. But I think our character Hema comes back with some pretty good arguments to the mangoes as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all sort of beautifully written into the story. There's a question here for you to ask me, Karim.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I've been intrigued, like, what made you want to stage Sweetmeats?
When I first read Sweetmeats, so, you know, the history of this for me is this writer, Karim Khan, had written an email to Tara in 2023 inviting us to come and see, not in 2023, in 2022, coming to his show Brown Boy Swim at Edinburgh Fringe. And coincidentally, I had planned to go to Edinburgh Fringe that year. And I went to see your show, your sort of first, made like full production on stage. And I watched it and I sort of thought the first thing that sort of came to me was the way you write characters. They're like people I know. They're so beautifully and authentically captured in the way they are. And I sort of thought to myself, there's definitely a script lying somewhere in our Tara archives that I've seen Karim's name on. And I went looking through the archives and I pulled out Sweetmeats. And I spoke to Abdul, our then artistic director, about it. And I said, this is a play that feels so political. It doesn't feel like a politically activated play as you first read it, but the subtext of it is all there. And there's so much of this that we can develop and draw out. And I think reading the play, there's so much that ignites the senses. There's so much of food in it. There's so much music. There's so much cultural references to music and film, the idea of tape recorders and all of these things. And I basically had read a script that put my grandmother in a leading role. And I sort of thought there's so much in this script that is what I knew of my grandmother, who lived in a sleepy little village called Shaw in Oldham in Manchester. And I only got to know snippets of her life. I only got to know my grandfather through her memories of him, or memories that my mother had of him, and pictures dotted through the house of a man that I never met. And I thought the way that it sort of ran the parallel of love and grief, and how intertwined and interconnected they are, and how unique they are to the individual person. Like, no one person feels love the same way, and no one person feels grief the same way as well. And I thought you captured that so well in the lives of these two characters, who feel like they've probably crossed each other at some point on the street, because they happen to live quite next to, like, close by to each other. But the meet cute of the play, of them meeting in a diabetes workshop, and then was just a really exciting thing. When I thought about staging it, I just sort of thought about, there's so much I can do in the polarity of their lives, but also the similarities of their lives as well. And I've become more interested in characters and their journeys. And of course, at Tara, for me, it's always about discovering voices that are not heard and not platformed. I've become very curious about the shoulders I'm standing on, and who came before me, and why I'm here. And almost feeling disappointed that I never got enough of a history of my grandmother and her story, other than in the latter part of her life. And this play gave me an opportunity to ask those questions. It gave me an opportunity to talk to my mother a bit more about her life. It gave me a little bit of an opportunity to talk to my dad about how he's dealt with diabetes for the last 20, 30 years, and that history as well. And how much of it he knows is the genetic link, is the history link of colonialism. I think as a director as well, around staging, when you've got a play that's talking about food and cooking food and tasting food and how it invokes memory, you know, that is already so delicious to work with. And I think on reading it, I remember you saying in one conversation we were having that you hadn't really thought about the staging, you just sort of wrote it. But actually, when I read the play, you'd already given, the way you'd written it had already given us so many sort of ideas. Immediately, I could see this on stage, and I could see how it could be, you know, all the elements could come together to tell this story. There was also an opportunity to pay a bit of homage to, you know, our grandparents' generation, as you pointed out. Like, I can't think of stories, at least on the canon for South Asian work, that has these people at the center of the narrative. And again, that's become so much more clear and so much more evident, particularly working with Shobha and Rehan, actors whose careers have, have gone for years and years. And even that conversation with them about how they've never actually played leading roles. They've always been part of big supporting casts, so they've always played someone's mom or someone's uncle or someone's dad. And this is the first time that that's not what their character is about. Yes, it's fed into their stories, but they are just people. And that was, for me, it's been such a privilege to be able to explore that and really celebrate the talents of people who are in our sector, who are finally almost feeling like they're finally getting an opportunity to step into the spotlight quite literally and kind of lead this main house stage at the Bush with just both of them, and they are tremendous. So I think I really felt like it was, I very rarely read plays and I'm like, this is it, this is the one that needs to go on stage, and Sweetmeats was definitely one of them.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for those kind words as well. That was great. Like, I really appreciate it. And it's been like such an honor to do this with you. Like, it's been, and to see it come to life and to see you bring it to life. I think one of my favourite things about the way you've brought it to life is, like when you were saying about the characters going on their journeys, I think something about the blocking and the movement of the characters, it feels like it captures like the natural reality of like South Asian elders, and like the idea of the journeys they make on a day-to-day level, as well as like the migration journeys as well. And the way you've staged it, it's got like a naturalism to it. Like the details in each of the locations feel like so precise. It's like you're kind of lurking into like, your grandma's living room or like a diabetes workshop. And I think all of that, is kind of like adding to what we were saying about giving like a platform to these voices and to these characters, and to like making them like the front and center of their story. It's almost like, the set is so huge and it's so big, and it kind of like commands like space, which I kind of really appreciate.
I think as well, talking about, because you have written into this piece, they do talk, one of the things that connects Liaquat and Hema in this play is that they share that journey of migration, that they've both come at some point in their lives for different reasons, but they have come to the UK, and they talk about that journey. Which really spoke to me, and I also, there's also something really wonderful about watching people who are older move. How do they physically move in spaces? How do they walk up and down a footpath? I found myself, when I was thinking about the staging and the blocking, just casually observing these people at bus stops or in supermarkets or at the train station. And in a world that feels really, really fast-paced all the time, or a world that feels like it's built for young people, I've also thoroughly enjoyed staging a play and directing a show with actors, and sort of really respecting and valuing this is the way that they move as well. So how do we kind of marry that with theatrical pacing, which is what we're always about, but also this wonderful story that you've given us, which is an opportunity for us to look into a slice of these people's 60, 65, 70 years of their lives. And I've really lent into that as well in their journeys of how they navigate spaces. And you get an opportunity for the 2 hours that this play runs, the 2.5 hours that this play runs, to just sit and stop and look and watch and observe people who very much make up this world still, who've contributed to this world in many ways. And I really enjoyed leaning into Shobha and Rehan and what they offer and how they move physically, theatrically, yes, but then how you negotiate that with being older actors themselves as well, and sort of finding things to really speak to the physical journeys of some of these characters, particularly Liaquat. His health declines over the course of the play as well, and just sort of really kind of embrace it and lean into it and make it part of the staging. And I think, yes, definitely a lot of the sort of feedback we've been getting is the relatability that some people see their members of their family, these characters, but also they just get to stop and listen, and they don't need to, without actively asking, we're just asking them to listen and pay attention to these people for a couple of hours and be inspired by them as well, and be really invested in these people too.
I think it's been so surprising to see how like invested an audience actually is in these characters' lives, and like the bond between them, and like I like seeing how reactive an audience is, like in terms of really willing them to get together almost, like
Yeah.
the romance of it, like in terms of like wanting that romance to come to fruition and like, wanting him to say how he feels about her and wanting, and it's so nice to see that within like the framework of an older love story, because I think we always see it like amongst younger people and like first love and like teenage coming of age stories, but I think what's been so enjoyable about bringing this story to life has been just to see like an audience really engage with like an older love story and to see how like love kind of functions in a different way.
I think the audience is they are so rooting for this romance, and I think we've had such a mix of different audiences come preview. I love preview audiences because you never know who you're going to get, which is the theatre audience in general, preview audiences. And we've had such a mix of South Asian audiences and other background audiences, but also young and old audiences who have come in as well. And everybody is sort of, I can feel the breath in the room being sort of held all the way through the show. And such audible kind of responses, just really rooting for this couple because you asked this question about love, but also when you look back at the lives of what was traditional in South Asian culture, which still exists, of course, but this traditionalism of arranged marriages or being married to somebody who was sort of a relative in the family and things like that, and this idea of discovering love in a marriage, and not all marriages have been lucky enough to discover that as you go along. Certainly for our characters, they've experienced their marriages, which they had when they were much younger, in very different ways. But then this idea of, love blossoming out of the meet cute or sort of meeting someone somewhere unexpectedly. But then I also think that irrespective of where this relationship heads, it's this everlasting impact that both these characters have left on each other's lives, and what that does for them in the latter part of their lives, when people very much feel like, well, this is it, we've lived our lives, this is the end, why should we feel joy and love and all of these things? But that's also what this story does. It kind of tells people who almost feel like, well, no, because you're old, you're not allowed to feel certain things, whether that's love, whether that's desire, whether that's passion. So that as well has been it's definitely, every show I work on changes me and evolves me in some way, but that's why we're artists. That's why we explore and discover the work. So that's definitely been something that our audiences are rooting for and are so invested in as well, which has been incredible to see, to go on that journey with them as well. There's only so much you can do in a rehearsal room, and then the audience come in and they're that final piece that you put to the puzzle of the questions you're asking by telling this story. And I've enjoyed that experience. Just sitting and taking an audience in as well has been really good fun. So Karim, the play, you mentioned a little bit, the play touches on health, aging, culture, and love in later life, which we've spoken about. How do you as a writer find the balance between humor and heart in the story?
I think for me, like, whenever I write a play or a story, I think for me, like, the humour and the pathos is really important, like constantly kind of playing with both those tones, kind of making an audience laugh, but also making them cry. And like constantly like balancing that, I think feels to me really important. But going off of what we were saying earlier, like, I think I was really interested in the metaphor behind like sugar and food and health and love and desire, and how much kind of the food that they're forbidding themselves of kind of represents like a desire that they feel, or like how much they're preventing themselves from feeling what they're feeling. And so I was really interested in, the connection between diabetes and health and romance and love, and kind of really connecting both those things. And it's interesting, like, what is this story really about? Is it actually about diabetes, or is it about love and romance? But I think it's about both those things intertwined. Having heart to the story is always important, and making making an audience connect to these characters and like fall in love with them and what happens between them, but also to leave something like an aftertaste that kind of makes them reflect
the taste in their mouths.
Literally.
I think as well that's been really fun but equally challenging to work out when you're staging, when you're sort of translating this from page to stage, because I really do feel like this play takes you on such an emotional roller coaster. There's moments where you're laughing and then suddenly there's a big justifiable shift because of that link between health and what other feelings can do as well. I think, as I mentioned earlier, Liaquat's character, his health is spoken to so much because he is a bit older than Hema, but he's also sort of in a place in his life where his health and his diabetes has really taken a toll on him physically as well. So that's been a really interesting discovery in the room for the actors and for me, sort of going from light to dark, from very intense emotional moments to humor but also the very emotional and intense moments also sort of making you laugh. There's this wonderful scene where Hema, recalls a memory and she herself is so overwhelmed by all of the emotions that collide for her. And I think that's, for me, again, that speaks so powerfully to this idea of how love and grief run on such close parallels to each other and are sort of, I don't know, the yin and the yang, or the twins that journey together inside you as a human being.
Sure.
I think one of the phrases that came up so much in rehearsal when we were interrogating it and working out the characters' intention and all of those is, I kept saying, human emotion is so complex. That's really sort of what I feel you've captured in the text so well, of how complex human emotion is. And one emotion isn't just one kind of binary emotion. It's so layered, and it's sort of so, like, love is triggered in a certain way and grief is triggered in a certain way and anxiety is triggered in a certain way. And I think kind of playing that and acting that when you're human beings who learn to navigate life, but then you're looking into the lives of characters and humanizing them, it is sort of really leaning in again into how complex human emotion can be. So that definitely sort of leaves that aftertaste in you. And quite literally, when you've eaten a laddu or you've eaten a roti or a paratha, it leaves that sort of taste in your mouth in the same way that experiences can with other people. So yes, I completely, that's been written, that metaphor has been written so powerfully in the play. And it has been a journey navigating that and balancing it in a way that your text lends itself to.
I was going to say also, I feel like with grief, people often say grief is almost like a representation of all the love you felt for that person, that you're no longer you're no longer able to express it because that person's there. So what you were saying about them being so intermingled, I think makes total sense in that sense. And also, I think it's interesting with this play how much the two offstage characters, Liaquat's wife and Hema's husband, are just as big in this play. Their presence is very big, and the way they're being evoked constantly by the characters, whether it's through the cassette tapes or through the food. And I think it's just really interesting because there's a love story that's developing between these two characters we see, but there's also these love stories that existed for years between their former partners. And I think and again, how much that speaks to our community and the way we hold on to our memories of the people that have gone.
We talked a little bit about this earlier, but how do you feel the play fits into wider stories about South Asian culture and representation?
Well, firstly, I'm really honoured that to do this play with Tara Theatre, in the sense that Tara, I think it's right at the beginning of South Asian theatre, developing the canon, and it feels like a very full circle moment to contribute another play to that canon with Tara, who started that as well. So it's I'm increasingly excited about joyous stories. I think sometimes when we talk about South Asian stories, sometimes they're there's moments of trauma in them that they can sometimes be clouded with trauma and pain, and of course that exists within this story as well. But I think I'm so excited about a story of joy and love and what that looks like, because I think in our canon, I think that is something that I'd love to see more of, and like to see more stories of like love and humour and just joy. And I think there's so much joy that exists between these characters, and also like them being older characters as well. Again, I think there's such a lack of that within our stories because they're often, like we were saying, like older, like parents, grandparents, and to see them like front and centre, like is such an exciting proposition.
Thank you for saying that. 50 years, everyone, approaching. Tara. Yes, Tara is, at the beginning of that, and equally, for me, I love new writing. That's sort of been the forefront of my first season of work, but it's also about capturing this idea that there isn't just sort of one singular monolith of what it means to be South Asian as well, because there are different communities and different demographics and people with different backgrounds of why they're here and what their migration stories are, or whether they're here second or third gen because their grandparents or parents migrated at some point, or whether they've come here for a very different reason, and they're talking more actively to current political climate, whether that's about the immigration story. And I think it is absolutely that. I think when I first started, I looked at a lot of these stories, which yes, were very relevant and very important to the communities back then, who are still around, because there is a little bit of that in this story. You can't talk about an older generation of people without talking specifically to their migration journeys and the impact that had on their lives, but also this idea of putting your head down and getting on with it as well. But I also think we need to represent our communities with joy and love and all these other emotions and other parts of their lives that they've lived as well, which I think quite often you very rarely see that. There's a lot of work on the canon about the partition stories. There's a lot of work on the canon about young people, what young people are doing, and it's about identity. It's about identity politics, and those are all very, very important stories as well. But I think that's something which sort of really made our kind of working relationship really great as well. But also this connection for Sweetmeats is that's exactly what it does. It talks, we see them laugh and we see them have fun and we see them be a bit naughty, and I think things like that are missing, and that's what makes this work very political as well, that we aren't seeing that on the canon. And I sort of envisage, when it comes to representation, a point in the future where I don't have young people write to me and say to me that there's no monologues for them to perform in their final year at drama, where they ask, there's nothing printed and there's nothing published and there's nothing available. I see a world in our sector where you can come into a script library and you can pick out Sweetmeats, and you can pick out I Dream of Theresa May, or you can pick out something like Speed or whatever, and it's there, and there's monologues and there's characters that sort of transcend the canon, even if it's not your playing age, but it allows you to explore other people and other stories. So I think this has been hugely monumental for representation and the canon sort of expanding so much more, and how wonderful that we get to do that with Tara, which has always been the forefront of it, but has definitely reinvigorated its catalyst for change. And part of that change as well is building the canon and making sure work is published and making sure work is taken out of London to other communities as well. And it's definitely bringing audiences in who haven't typically wanted to come to the theatre. Because when you're living this life that feels quite, as you said, which is sort of littered with trauma and littered with all of these things, why do you want to come to the theatre and see the exact same thing being said to you? It's hard enough as it is. So there's something nice about being able to come to the theatre and switch off for a bit and laugh a bit. And that, as well as what theatre spaces need to continue to offer. And it's most definitely something that Tara does and the Bush do as well. How do you feel audiences have responded so far, Karim?
Yeah.
We've got preview audiences at the moment, but so far it has been in front of different audience members so far ahead of opening for its full run. But how are you feeling at the moment about audience responses?
Yeah, I'm feeling great. I think, like what I said earlier, I think it's been so nice to see how much an audience is enjoying the show. Like how, like it always like warms my heart seeing how much people laugh.
Yeah.
Like how, like in terms of like laughing at the jokes that I forgot were funny.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Oh
oh,
my
yeah,
gosh,
that was
yeah.
funny.
When on first preview on Saturday, and our Sim, our lighting designer, and Hugh, sound designer, and Aldo, second costume, well, we just sort of met in the interval, and all of us were like, we've forgotten how funny this play is, because you go through this very intense period of rehearsal and tech, and we were like, this play is actually really hilarious, and just hearing all of the laughter come in, but also watching the actors respond, like Shobha and Rahan respond to that, and sort of not accounting for, when I know that a play is really funny, I sometimes do say to my actors, if people laugh, remember to kind of take that breath and pause so we're not losing the words in the script. But of course, veteran actors, they both sort of were like, okay, here's the joke. Laugh, and now I'm going to come back in with the next thing. And that was just really wonderful and really heartwarming. I think people are really interested as well in the special effects in the play, without giving too much away. I had lots of questions about this one effect that I'm not going to give away, because you need to come and see the show. And I think as well, it's also this ambition that I have with Tara as well, to really improve the quality of work that gets put on stage, for South Asian work, South Asian led work, to be respected and valued as much as anybody's work in this sector, for it not to be considered as that one show that might sell some seats, or that one sort of mediocre show. Because I think for too long, playwrights haven't been given enough time and enough space to develop their work, to have time to R&D work, time to work with dramaturgs, which I know that Sweetmeats definitely went through a period of development before it came to us at Tara, and then with Tara as well went on to continue being developed, to bring it into a place where you felt confident enough that it was ready to be staged as well. So I think as well, high quality output has become a really important part of my ambition for Tara, and really kind of valuing South Asian work as world-class work and on par. And you should spend how much ever the ticket costs to come and see this work, because you're going to get something not just beautiful, but also something really visually stunning as well. So I think that's something definitely that Tara will continue to drive through as we approach 50 years, and to continue to support playwrights like you to give us the work so that we can really kind of elevate it. And how does work going from being good to great, which was a conversation I was having with Teo, the artistic director here at the Bush yesterday. But yeah, and that's been, so yes, joy, high quality work, special effects, all that good stuff. As we bring this conversation to a close, Karim, what would you, me, us, what would we like audiences to take away from a show like Sweetmeats?
I think firstly, like when you mentioned earlier, like, I think just to be entertained and to enjoy the show, to have a good night out. I think like I can't underestimate the significance of just like going to the theatre and having a good time with people you love. Like I think this show feels like it is an opportunity for that. But I think also, for them to think, and I think the way the play's been staged and everything, like just to linger on those moments with these characters, and like in terms of like their lives, and like what the sacrifices they've made and what it takes to be in this country and the things they're dealing with, I think, and just to like get a glimpse into that a little bit. And I think you've mentioned this before as well, but like this idea that once you see something like that, it's almost like seeking the people that you love and wanting to talk to them.
Yeah, definitely. I do, not that because the Shobha's character is called Hema and my mum's called Hema. So then the number of times I hear Hema in the show, and then I'm like, I need to bring my mum. But it's definitely that. I wanted to feel like a show where people our age can decide, I'm bringing my parents to see this show, because the music in this show is the music that they grew up listening to. The stories in the show are the stories that they can relate to as well. And I think for me, I really want audiences to take away a sense of who they are and what made them, and to just kind of, this idea that going to the theatre in general, art and making theatre, it's the biggest act of resistance that we need right now. in a world that's feeling so volatile and so difficult to kind of exist in when you're of a certain identity and background. And I think, yes, a moment to come and to breathe and to laugh and to cry and to feel safe and held to have all of those emotions and then connect. If it's a story that then gets audience members who don't know each other to talk to each other as well. And obviously with the Bush being very well located in Shepherd's Bush, right next to Shepherd's Bush Market, to come and support all these independent businesses, have a bit of food, support the theatre and watch good, incredible shows by global majority-led teams feels like a really exciting thing that audiences can take away and feel hopeful for as we continue to navigate the world.
Yeah.
So I really want people to feel that, to feel celebrated, to feel seen, but to definitely feel a sense of connection as well, or reconnection to a parent or a grandparent that they haven't spoken to in a while. So thanks so much, Karim. I really enjoyed talking to you. Why don't you let us know where people can come to see Sweetmeats and when it's on till?
Yeah, so people can come to see Sweetmeats at the Bush Theatre until the 21st of March.
So yes, this Sweetmeats by Karim Khan is on for a couple of weeks. Do catch it in this Tara Theatre and Bush Theatre co-production.